Taiwan is an island country with a population of around 24 million, located only 160 kilometers from mainland China and ranks 21st among the world's largest economies. But this country is not recognized by the People's Republic of China. Moreover, the Chinese government sees Taiwan as a part torn away from itself. In recent days, tensions between the two countries have come to a boiling point. But how far back do the roots of this tension go? To understand this, we need to look at the intertwined history of China and Taiwan. Let's start by taking a look at the origins of Taiwan and its people. The trace of the oldest settlement in Taiwan dates back to about 6,000 years ago, to 4000 BC. We don't know much about Taiwan's first natives. However, 3% of the population in Taiwan is thought to be descendant from this indigenous people. The name given to the Taiwanese culture of this period by archaeologists is the Depenkan culture. So, how did this culture come about? First, it's worth noting that Taiwan's indigenous population is thought to be a mix of peoples who migrated to the island from both southern China and Austronesian regions. What we mean by the Austronesian region stretches from Madagascar on the African coast to eastern islands of the Pacific Ocean. Historians think that the expansion in the Austronesian region gained momentum after Taiwan was opened to settlements. In addition, linguists suggest that the original homeland of the languages that make up the Austronesian language family is Taiwan. So, what does all this mean? Let's try to explain briefly. Taiwan became an important settlement from 4000 BC. Sometime after that, the natives of the island developed a trade network with other peoples in southern China, Korea, Japan, and the Austronesian region. This accelerated cultural interaction, and Taiwan played a catalyst role in this interaction. In other words, even about 5,000 years ago, Taiwan had a great strategic and geopolitical importance. Due to its importance, the island had attracted the attention of other peoples in the region throughout history. Especially since the 3rd century AD, the island began to receive intense immigration from China. This was because the three kingdoms that ruled in China were at war. Taiwan was seen as the safest haven to sail to for the defeated and those fleeing the war. The most important effect of Chinese immigration was the change in the cultures of the people who settled in Taiwan. The Taiwanese people made their living through agriculture, hunting, and fishing. Their beliefs and cultures were intertwined with nature, myths, and magic. Therefore, it was not difficult for them to adapt to the teachings of Confucianism, Taoism, and Yin-Yang, which came from China and emphasized the balance of man with nature. The first invasion of Taiwan by China took place around the 7th century BC. Xiu Dynasty records from this period referred to Taiwan as Liu Qiu. Geographical discoveries which started in the 15th century and gained momentum in the following centuries also created certain breaking points in the history of Taiwan. The British, Portuguese, Spanish, Dutch, and French showed interest in the island and wanted to establish a colony here. The first Western sailors to reach Taiwan were the Portuguese, who named it Ilha Formosa, meaning beautiful island. By the 1620s, the Dutch East India Trading Company began to attempt to establish a military base in this region in order to control the colonies in Asia. Their first target was the Penghu Islands, just a few kilometers from Taiwan. But their naval expedition here was repulsed by the Chinese, and after that, the Dutch invaded the south of Taiwan and established a colonial state. But they were not the only ones to recognize the island's importance to Asian colonial empires. In 1626, the Spaniards went to the north of the island and captured it. But the Spanish presence on the island did not last long. A few years later, they withdrew from Taiwan and returned to their bases in the Philippines. The Dutch continued to rule the island until 1662. Here, they established a tax system, opened schools, and engaged in missionary activities. However, from 1660 onwards, conditions began to change for the Dutch. A pirate loyal to the Ming Dynasty, named Cohinga, had begun to attack major Dutch bases in Taiwan. Finally, in 1662, Cohinga captured Zealandia, the most important Dutch stronghold in Taiwan, and founded the Tongan Kingdom, expelling the Dutch from the island. Thus, a kingdom affiliated to the Ming Dynasty was established in Taiwan. This meant that Taiwan was occupied again by the Chinese. Yes, the Ming Dynasty had won a victory over the Dutch in Taiwan. However, in the same years, they suffered a great defeat against the Qing Dynasty in their own land. This was the harbinger of a new immigration movement to Taiwan. Ming supporters fleeing the Qing Dynasty left the mainland and began to settle in Taiwan. This led to a further increase in the Chinese population in the region. Also, the fact that Taiwan had become a refuge for Ming sympathizers troubled the Qing Empire. By the 1680s, the Tongan Kingdom was constantly plagued by power struggles. Cohinga's grandson now had no choice but to surrender to the Qing Dynasty and leave their lands to them. After that, the island was annexed by the Qing Dynasty. In other words, the Chinese had defeated other Chinese people and re-invaded the island. However, one of the following emperors, Kuan Yi, did not show much interest in Taiwan, but his advisors were aware of how important the island was to the region, and they steadfastly opposed Kuan Yi's request to withdraw from the island. Finally, the emperor gave up on withdrawing from Taiwan. However, he restricted the immigration movement to Taiwan. Although the Chinese population on the island decreased to a certain extent during this period, the immigration movement revived after the restrictions were lifted. By the 1800s, the number of Chinese in Taiwan had exceeded 2 million people. During the Qing Dynasty, the British, French, Portuguese, and Spaniards made various attempts to seize the island, but these did not yield any results. Each time, China succeeded in repelling European colonists from Taiwan. But the real danger came not from the west, but from the east. After Japan won the Sino-Japanese War that started in 1894, the Qing Dynasty had to cede Taiwan to Japan with the Shimonoseki Agreement signed in 1895. During the 5 months after Japan entered Taiwan, it met with serious resistance. To deal with the situation in Taiwan, Japanese politicians began to implement martial law and combined it with oppressive cultural policies. They appointed governors from Japan to the island, forcing people to speak Japanese and take Japanese names. Aside from this, the Japanese government had not only practiced oppression on the island, they also made some contributions. Under Japanese rule, Taiwan experienced economic development, an increase in agricultural exports, and the development of new agricultural practices. With the education reform, new schools were opened and a postal system was established. Also, in this period, with the development of the banking system, Taiwan's currency began to be appreciated. Japan's dominance in Taiwan continued for nearly 50 years. With the end of the Second World War, Japan was forced to withdraw from all regions except its own territory. This marked the official end of Japanese rule in Taiwan. And according to the Cairo Declaration issued in 1943, Taiwan would again come under Chinese rule. More precisely, to the domination of the Republic of China, which was established after the overthrow of the Qing Dynasty in 1912. As we mentioned before, Taiwan was under the control of the Qing Dynasty uninterruptedly for nearly 200 years. This time was enough for Chinese culture to spread and settle in Taiwan. If the old cultural ties are also involved, it can be accepted that the island has been under Chinese influence for a long time. However, when the representatives of the Republic of China came back to Taiwan after 50 years of Japanese rule, they encountered a people who spoke Japanese and dressed as Japanese. Moreover, things had changed quite a bit. Taiwan was no longer the old Taiwan. It was much more technologically advanced than mainland China. Railroads, telephone lines, manufacturing technology. It was as if Taiwan was years ahead of China. In this situation, it was quite natural that the local people did not welcome the new invaders and desired independence. In addition, the Republic of China had begun to implement highly corrupt policies in Taiwan. They looted homes, businesses, and factories. They were keeping the Taiwanese out of rule and building a new colonial state. Taiwan was occupied again by China. Although the United States was disturbed by the policies implemented in Taiwan, it continued to support the Republic of China against Mao and his communists, who started to rise slowly in China. Eventually, history repeated itself in 1949, with Mao's capture of Beijing and Nanking. Just like in the past, there was only one haven for the defeated: Taiwan. By the end of 1948, the number of immigrants fleeing from mainland China to Taiwan was around 30,000 a day. One of these refugees was the leader of the Chinese Republic, Chiang Kai-shek. The People's Republic of China was officially established in 1949. By contrast, the Republic of China under Chiang Kai-shek was not over. Yes, it had lost most of its territory, but Taiwan was excluded. In this case, the Chinese Civil War theoretically continued. On one side was the People's Republic of China under Mao Zedong, and on the other was Chiang Kai-shek, the leader of the Republic of China. In fact, since we have come this far, we can assume that we have grasped the issue in general terms. If you are aware, the relationship between China and Taiwan from the beginning of the video shows a tremendous similarity. When we look at the history of Taiwan, especially in the last 2000 years, we see that similar events take place at regular intervals. Let's remember once again that we first mentioned that the defeated parties in the War of the Three Kingdoms migrated to Taiwan. Then we mentioned that those loyal to the Ming dynasty took refuge in Taiwan to escape Qing domination. Finally, we saw that the destination of the Chinese fleeing from Mao was Taiwan. The events actually almost completely repeat themselves. The Qing dynasty saw the Ming presence in Taiwan as a threat and invaded the island. In fact, it is not much different today. Today, the People's Republic of China regards Taiwan as its lost territory and does not recognize the Republic of China as a country. The fact that one of the first promises of almost every leader who became the head of People's Republic of China is to unite with Taiwan shows how sensitive the issue is for China. Today, there are only 15 countries that recognize Taiwan, and they do not include the United States. On paper, Taiwan and the United States appear not to be allies. But actually, the United States is Taiwan's largest arms supplier and has tight economic ties to the island. It looks like it will definitely take action in the defense of the island in case of any war.